Hi there guys, I hope you are having a good day. Now, the WBC have announced that they have put Tony Bellew in charge of their committee regarding the possibility of creating a new weight class between cruiserweight and heavyweight. The hypothetical limit will be £225. That's 16 stone 1 pounds. Now, previously the cruiserweight division was created because there were heavyweights who just could not compete with the larger ones and were too big in the light heavyweight division. So the cruiserweight division was created so that those guys who were too small to compete with the bigger guys, they were able to fight in the cruiserweight division rather than weight drain themselves and drop down to light heavyweight, because that was a weight that they could not make. So they were kind of in between. That was why the cruiserweight division was made. Now, heavyweights still seem to be getting bigger and bigger, but does that warrant another division? Do we need another division? Is there a point where heavyweights are losing fights just because they are too small? Well, the interesting thing is Anthony Joshua weighed in at 16 stone 13 pounds for his fight with Andy Ruiz Jr., the rematch on December 7th last year, and Deontay Wilder regularly weighs in around 16 stone, maybe a little bit more, sometimes even as low as 15 stone. Or just above that. So these fighters are around that 16 stone mark. But then you have Tyson Fury over 19 stone. So I believe that creating another weight class would lose a lot of the top heavyweights to that division, because there are many fighters who could make 16 stone 1 pounds. I mean, I believe Dillian White could. I believe Deontay Wilder could. Maybe Anthony Joshua could. It would be a push, of course, but ultimately there would be many fighters who could make that weight. Alexander Usyk definitely could. So is there a risk that the top heavyweights could be lost to that division because there is more chance of them winning a world championship title in that division, because they don't have to fight the guys with the physical advantages over them? Look at like Joseph Parker versus Anthony Joshua. Joshua used his physical advantages to keep Joseph Parker out of range the whole night. Same in the Andy Ruiz Jr. rematch. Anthony Joshua used his physical advantages, his movement as well, of course, but ultimately it was his size that allowed him to keep Andy Ruiz Jr. and Joseph Parker at range. Whereas if they were to drop down into that weight class between cruiserweight and heavyweight, they would be fighting fighters who are the same height as them and with no physical advantages, meaning the fighters would be a similar size. Now, it's not just about height, it's about weight as well. Anthony Joshua is 6'6", and he weighed in at 16 stone 13 pounds. Andy Ruiz Jr. 6'1", 6'2", weighed in over 20 stone. Yet still in the fight, it was Anthony Joshua who used his physical advantages to win the fight, despite being over 3 stone lighter than Andy Ruiz Jr. So, does that not mean that Anthony Joshua would be more likely to make 16 stone 1 than Andy Ruiz Jr.? It may seem that way, because there's a 3 stone difference. So is it really going to change all that much about the physical advantages some fighters have over others? Look at Callum Smith in the super middleweight division, 6'3", nearly 6'4", fighting fighters who are 6 foot, 6'1", sometimes under 6 foot. It's just his physical advantages, but he can still make the weight. So why should he not fight in the super middleweight division if he can, and keep those physical advantages that he has, the height and reach? Because some fighters might be bigger but weigh less than fighters who are smaller. I mean, of course, you can see the argument. You can see that the cruiserweight limit is £200, and then you have some heavyweights weighing in at 270. That's a £70 gap. And if you have a heavyweight weighing in around the cruiserweight limit, like David Haye used to, then you have him going in there with someone who weighs 250, 260, maybe 270 pounds. How is that an even playing field? It really isn't, because most weight classes are £7 in between. Then you have the heavyweight division or a cruiserweight jumping up. Look at if Usyk fought Tyson Fury. Imagine the weight difference there would be between those two going into the ring. So you can kind of see the argument that they have. Some heavyweights just weigh too much to be in there with smaller fighters who maybe could not make cruiserweight. Now, choosing Tony Bellew to be on a committee regarding this, I believe is a good choice, because during his career, he was a victim of the weights. Obviously, he stayed in the light heavyweight division too long. I mean, going into fights in the light heavyweight division, particularly Adonis Stevenson, he looked extremely weight drained. He looked like he was already depleted going into the ring, already down to like 70% by the time he walked into the ring. Just the weight was too much for him to try and make. 6'3", he's a big guy as well, making 12 stone 7. It just wasn't going to work for Tony Bellew. But look what happened when he moved up to cruiserweight. Rejuvenated, different fighter completely. When he left that division, he was number 1, moved up to heavyweight and fought David Haye twice, winning both of those fights. So Tony Bellew knows what it's like to go into a lower weight class when he should be in a higher one, then go from cruiserweight to heavyweight, be in a division where, I mean, he was against David Haye, a former cruiserweight, but ultimately he was a very, very small heavyweight going into that fight with David Haye, who weighed in the first fight over 16 stone, whereas Tony Bellew weighed in a little bit over the cruiserweight limit. So by creating a weight class in between, that makes it a little bit more favourable for fighters coming up from a cruiserweight who maybe cannot no longer make that weight, but also when they go into the heavyweight division, they are fighting guys 50, 60 pounds heavier than them for a world title opportunity. I mean, look at Michael Hunter, small heavyweight. He was a good cruiserweight, very fast, but his advantages in the heavyweight division is his speed, his movement over the bigger guy. That is the one thing. In this new division, these smaller guys will not have the speed advantages and the movement advantages. That is the one thing that they have over these bigger heavyweights. They may not have the size, the weight, maybe not even the power, but ultimately they have that speed and movement. So they have their own advantages as well. How do you think David Haye beat Bellew? If it was just down to size, Bellew would have beat him, but David Haye used his speed and movement to win that fight. But that being said, you cannot ignore the physical advantages and the size and weight of the bigger guy over the smaller man. And there would be top heavyweights lost to that division. Michael Hunter, for one. Maybe Alexander Povetkin. I wouldn't say Joseph Parker because he is a bigger heavyweight, even though he's, 6'4". So he's not like a tall heavyweight compared to Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. But ultimately, he is a big, stocky heavyweight. He does often weigh in over 17 stone. So he would not be making this new weight division that they are planning on making. Oscar Rivas is another one he would likely slot in to that new weight division. So yes, this new weight division between cruiserweight and heavyweight would be beneficial to certain fighters, but the only thing is are they going to want to fight in a new weight class? Maybe they lose their physical advantages by going into that division because they're used to fighting the taller, heavier guys anyway. I guess we will just have to wait and see. Anyway, guys, what are your thoughts on this? Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below, leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you are new. Thanks, guys.